Well, it's been a little bit of a hot minute since you've seen our ugly mugs here and listened to our gravelly voices on the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, but we're back. Hopefully everybody had a good fourth and have been doing well in the little bit of the doldrums here. But John Sheeran, we are so close to training camp, which starts kicking off kind of at the end of next weekend, all that kind of stuff. We've got Bengal Jim's Jungle Jam next weekend. Should be a big event in which Cincy Jungle and the Believe in Cincy podcast channel will have some representation. So we're excited about that. But big stuff ahead, even though it's been a little quiet the last couple of weeks. But good to be back. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well, man. And I don't really feel like we've needed to do a show recently because whenever Joe Burrow hops on a podcast, that gets like 1 billion times more engagement than we ever do. So I think he had us covered when he hit the mic with the Part of My Take Boys, which was quite the episode. Did you listen to it, Anthony?
I listened to bits and pieces of it. Yeah. The guy, the Steelers guy on that show cracked me up a couple of times.
Yeah.
I can't remember his name right now, but yeah, and of course, they're not a sponsor of this show, but Body Armor getting a lot of run with with Burrow's shirt and all kinds of stuff there. But yeah, entertaining to say the least, for sure. And you still see, as if we all knew it was still there. You still saw and heard the fire in Burrow's belly, especially when it comes to making a comeback. The rest of the AFC North can go pound sand, all that kind of stuff. The fire's there. The fire's there, and he's ready to, he's ready to prove people wrong. He's ready to, assert himself back into many, many conversations. I thought, and it really kind of is. I mean, we live in such a, now type of time and society, I guess. And he made kind of a good point, like, I was number 1 overall pick. I made a Super Bowl, all this kind of stuff, but I was hurt for half a year and people forgot about me, and I don't think that's fully true, but there is some element of truth to that because it's, what have you done for me lately? Right.
Yeah. It's about being in the conversation, I guess. And when the guy doesn't play, it's hard to, I guess, kind of keep him up in that standing when there are guys like CJ Stroud who are making a name for themselves. And, of course, I think the top 4 quarterbacks of the AFC who were playing ended up being like one of the top 4 remaining, I guess. And I think that was part of it, just watching it all from the sidelines, not playing in that final stretch of games when as many eyes as possible are watching you when the games matter the most. Of course, games that the Bengals are accustomed to winning when Burrow is under center. It was a good example to me, Anthony, of like the Bengals eventually want to get to where the Chiefs are, where they're perennial contenders. But of course, no one is doubting the Chiefs ever, right? They're never in a position where the Chiefs have anyone to prove wrong. And I think both Burrow and a lot of the players, and especially the fans, this is what I've gathered over the past couple of years, there's always more of a comfort level of being on this side of the fence when you still have something to prove. Whereas like last year, you had multiple outlets, publications, everyone under the sun was proclaiming the Bengals as Super Bowl favorites, even going as far as picking them to win the whole damn thing. And of course, that didn't work out. And now we're kind of back to this point where they have a lot to prove. They're coming from last in the division. And I think we're still at the point where I don't know if the collective Bengals fandom, players, whatever, is ready to be listed as a favorite, I guess. There's still more of a comfort level of being hungry and trying to prove people wrong. And, there's a lot of fuel in that. And obviously Burrow's done a lot with that in itself. But that was one of the takeaways I had when he was talking about that, for sure.
This has to be one of the most, and I don't know. I guess this is exaggeratory or whatever, but I mean, really, this has to be one of the most anticipated seasons, maybe in team history. I mean, when you look at where they've been the last couple of years, just everything they went through last year and coming up just short of sneaking into the postseason. You said yes, last in the division, but still a winning record and making a run at things at the end of the season there when their team was, kind of a little bit of a mess with injuries and different things going on. Then you got this year with Burrow back, expectations, reloaded roster, and you have the Hard Knocks appearance later in the season as well to kind of give some more luster to everything. So, I mean, I think, and this is why next week and all these things are going to be pretty exciting. This is the kind of thing that makes this become really one of the most anticipated seasons and anxious off seasons. I mean, I think there's eagerness, there's caution, there's high expectations. There's this weird blend of a lot of different feelings and emotions going into this training camp and this season.
100%. And of course, whenever Burrow comes back from an injury, there's always a lot of hesitation as well that kind of gets paired with that. But no, I think just the combination of what the state of the division is now, how good people believe the Bengals can be, the fact that the AFC is still this insane gauntlet, and there still only seems to be one team and quarterback that is capable of beating Mahomes in a given week. It's all kind of leading up to what this season seems to be. And the first step is, I guess, getting through training camp, which is going to be the topic of the show today.
We are going to talk quite a bit about training camp. We're gonna have a little fun, kind of some top threes in terms of emotions that we're feeling or things we're looking for, that sort of thing, as it pertains to training camp. We've also got a fun remember him towards the end and a couple quasi announcements that will also bring you a little bit. Again, this is the Orange and Black Insider, part of the Believe in Cincy podcast channel on the Believe Network. You have to resubscribe to our new channel link. We don't have the old feed anymore. We have a new feed. So if you like the audio side of things, whether you get that through iTunes or Stitcher or any of the other type of audio platforms that you can find the Believe in Cincy channel, you have to resubscribe to that. Give us a like if you can too, or a review on that on your particular platform. That would be fantastic if you could do that for us. And you can get this show, Talking Football with Bengal Jim and Friends. They've had some fun people on of late. Matt and Willie No Ball with Matt Minnick and Willie Lutz, as well as 3 and Out with Jason and Kevin. Jason and Kevin are going to be on site for Jungle Jam, one of just a couple of media people that are covering the event. So they're going to be there. I may sneak out there. I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out. But those two are going to definitively be there. So go say hi to them. They'll have a little table spot. So go say hi to them. We're going to try and snag some interviews and obviously sights and sounds of everything going on for the afternoon. And if for some reason you aren't able to be there, but you want to check things out after the fact, you can check that out probably on our YouTube channel, where our show and 3 and Out does their thing, as well as on Cincy Jungle. We'll be posting some stuff there. Speaking of the YouTube channel, go give that if you're watching us on that, down underneath John by that Cincy Jungle icon, go click the Orange and Black Insider show icon and the subscribe button. Give us a thumbs up. All the things that, we make you jump through so many hoops just to pat us on the back. That's how we are. We're that egotistical, John. I can't believe it. But no, thank you everybody for your support of this show for so many years. Appreciate it. We have fun doing it. And we have some cool things to talk about towards the end. And we'll work towards that. But anyway, let's talk Bengals training camp now that we've had our shameless self-promotions out of the way. Where do you want to start with, my friend? Or do we want to start with the caution? Do we want to start with the intrigue? Do we want to start optimistic? What are we thinking of?
I'm feeling optimistic. Let's start with the good. Let's start with the good first, and we'll work our way down.
All right. Top 3 facets of excitement heading in to Bengals training camp. I think first and foremost, the reloading for me, the reloading of certain positions is kind of where I'm excited, and I'm going to hone in specifically, and it'll tease a little bit to maybe something that's occurring next week, but I'm going to hone in on the tight end group, because I am really finally the Bengals made sizable investments in free agency and the draft. Now, sizable, you're talking about, day 3 picks here, but those are 2 quality picks that they made in the draft. And then they did get a guy who's been very productive as a pro, former high pick himself, Mike Gesicki. So I am very, very excited about the tight end group. I'm excited about the talent that's there. And oh, by the way, forgotten guy, Tanner Hudson. Drew Sample is back, and he'll be kind of a hybrid player. So I think now this gives the Bengals a lot of flexibility on their roster and an added dimension and depth that they really haven't had, even in the Super Bowl years type of thing.
Depth is the real thing I want to point out there, because I think Gesicki on the surface looks extremely exciting, and just seeing him stretch the field, snag passes out of the air with that insane wingspan, that's all going to be great. In training camp, though, bumps and bruises happen along the way. Some guys are going to take some days off, and some other guys are going to get some snaps in there. But they're pretty deep in terms of just guys I want to see get reps. Like, as soon as Eric All gets healthy and fully cleared, I want to see him running routes. I want to see how natural his hands are. Tanner McLaughlin can't go unsaid in this whole thing as well, because he does come into camp with a little bit more health, and he had a phenomenal last 2 seasons at a Power 5 school. I think he broke the Arizona record for most career receptions at the position. So just how quickly can he translate his game into an NFL offense and just be a legitimate receiving weapon in these practice situations? Because it's a deep group right now. We're not really sure how many they're going to keep at the position, but if all of them prove worthy with the exposure that they get in training camp, like, it's going to create a good conversation. So I just feel good about where the position is as a whole. And when all these guys do get reps with different quarterbacks and different units of the team as well, I'm intrigued to see what they can do, because it's not like even if they're not like ready to go week 1 or anything like that, the potential is there, and I want to see how it looks when it's first exposed to real NFL practices.
Yeah. So when we look back, the group spearheaded by CJ Uzomah in 21, that when they went to the Super Bowl, he had a nice season that year. 5 touchdowns, 493 yards. Parlayed that into a nice contract with the Jets. And but I think still with Gesicki, and then Hurst followed that up as well, with some nice moments for the Bengals, particularly. I remember the Bills game, all that kind of stuff. I just feel like the ceiling seems to be higher from Gesicki and his ability to kind of like you said, kind of move around a little bit. And I feel like my hope is that this group gives Evan McPherson a little more time on the bench. And I mean that in the best way, which is, let's not settle for the big field goals. Let's get the ball into the end zone. Let's really be effective in the red zone, particularly as the year goes on. We've talked about a lot on this show that the red zone issues, even when the Bengals went to the Super Bowl AFC Championship, they were not highly effective. They were not scoring a lot of points in some of those games. It was a lot of long field goals, tough field goals for Evan McPherson. I love Evan McPherson. I think he is fantastic. I think he is money from long distances, and that was an Achilles heel for the Bengals and their kickers for so many years. But the Bengals, in order to effectively get past some of the other big dogs in the AFC and into the Super Bowl potentially, they need to score points and be more effective in the red zone. And I think that's why I'm really excited about this group. They provide that ability to do so.
On the topic of receiving weapons, I'm not going to stray too far away from that. In fact, I'm going to stay in the exact same area. About a month ago, we didn't know when T. Higgins was going to show up, right? We thought that it was going to be the end of training camp. He was going to sign his tender, whole 9 yards. He's under contract now. He has no reason to hold out. He's not expected to not participate. He's expected to report. And Jamar Chase is perfectly fine. Jermaine Burton got a ton of work in OTAs and minicamp. How the 3 of them look for the first time all playing together? If Burton is actually one of the 3 in their starting 11 personnel package, if that ends up being Trident Irwin maybe out the gate, and they just ease Jermaine Burton into it as training camp goes on, because based off of how he was looking with Burrow in OTAs and minicamp, it looked like he was probably ahead of schedule. And I don't say that as someone who thought he was like raw or anything, because he had plenty of starting experience at arguably the biggest college program in the nation, but he's still a rookie, right? And there still could be some ups and downs that you kind of go when you're handling NFL speed for the first time. But it just looks so seamless to him in his first exposure to practices. And it shouldn't take him long to be one of the top three, if he's not top three out of the gate. And I know, I think it was T. Martin who was commenting on an appearance I had on Locked On, who proclaimed that I didn't know that Jermaine Burton wasn't going to be just a slot only receiver. I understand like Jermaine Burton's skill set. I understand he's not going to be stuck into the slot, but how that dynamic looks anyways, like if he is going to take the majority of his reps in the slot when you have those guys on the outside and Higgins and Chase, because how much they want to move them around, I think it's going to be another thing. But it's so exciting to me to see all three of them work together for the first time, and the fact that they don't have to deal with this huge concern question mark with T. Higgins and when he's going to show up.
That in with Burton, this continues to play into the narrative of why the Bengals like to go after big school guys, because not only does Burton, again, it's a lot of the stuff was helmets and shorts and different things, but I mean, he looked good, and he's on, he's bounced around a lot. His college career is lengthier than some of the other players. He's a little older than some of the players coming out, that sort of thing. But the big school thing, we haven't really said this directly, but the big school thing and why the Bengals often prefer the big school players is really twofold. And it's they like that learning curve to be less steep from these guys that are coming from these big programs, played in big games, played in championship games, that sort of thing. But just the complexities of the styles of offenses or defenses that they're in and that sort of thing. And really the ability to just kind of hit the ground running. And when they come into camp, they're just not so, big-eyed a lot of times. Now, granted, there are exceptions to that rule, but I think this is Burton and what he has shown in a short period of time. There are reasons for it, age and experience in college, but also the programs he played for in college. And so that is allowing the Bengals to say, okay, we're excited about this kid, and we can entrust this kid with a pretty big role on this team right away, even with the star power at that position group in front of him.
Yeah, and alongside him too, not just looking at the top two. I think in their perfect world, you have Yoshi who's taking that next step, and he's able to get some reps of his own. And I think if they don't have to put it all on Burton to be that new number 3 in whatever role that is, I think that's perfectly fine for them. They still want to give Trenton Irwin snaps because of the trust that he has with Burrow and the reliability that he has as a pass catcher. So giving them 5 guys, no pun intended with the restaurant, who can, you can see the field in different alignments. Of course, you want to have the explosion that Burton offers you. That is an immediate mismatch for whatever defenses are going up against you, and it forces defenses to play you differently so long as he's trustworthy and reliable. You want to have that. But I think if they also can play Yoshi and Irwin a decent amount and not put it all on his plate immediately from the get-go, I think that's the best case scenario. And I think they're going to give both those guys plenty of reps alongside with him as they kind of figure out how this dynamic is now that Tyler Boyd's no longer in the picture.
Yeah. So I think we've talked about 2 facets of excitement that we're looking at. I guess this is a little more of a macro, and we can dissect this a little bit more, but really the refreshment and replenishment of talent in key spots on the defense is really where I'm excited about, because safety was a mess last year for the most part. And I think, again, it's kind of one of those things. The Bengals expected to lose, Bates and some other players going into that offseason. But they weren't expecting to lose a couple of key guys that they ended up losing, and that's Samaje Perine at running back. And I think they kind of felt like Von Bell was going to be a guy that they could keep and kind of keep that ship at least a little bit afloat with some of the new guys they're trying to integrate in there. You lose both of them in an offseason, and you lose massive communication. It was just a mess. Now, Jordan Battle showed a lot of promise towards the end of the year, and I think he's got a bright future with this team for sure. But now you have Battle, who took some nice steps last year. You bring back Bell, who brings physicality and a lot of headiness back there. And then you have Geno Stone, who also brings, high football IQ, great kind of field awareness out there as well. So that area, and then getting some interior pass rush help in the form of Sheldon Rankins. Those are two areas that the Bengals, needed some help, needed some additional rotation, and they've got it. And so they've got experience. And so again, you don't have Jesse Bates back there anymore. That's the reality. But you have guys now that you feel could step in, and potentially Chris Jenkins Jr. as well, coming into the interior defensive line too. So I like the replenishment that they've done to certain spots on the defensive side of the ball, because there were obvious issues last year.
Yeah, having more proven and known guys at safety just makes everyone in front of them, I think, more comfortable. I think just Von Bell being back, like, I definitely underestimated the likelihood of him starting when he signed here. I think just him being back, I think it's just provided a sigh of relief for everyone who was going to play with him, specifically Lou, calling these defenses and calling these disguised coverages that he can just whip out whenever he needs to against the best quarterbacks. I underestimated that, and I don't think we're going to be. I don't think it should be surprising to see Bell rarely come off the field in training camp and whatnot. They'll still give Battles some run, but I think the more that they have Bell out there to really even things out, the better, more comfortable everyone's going to be. In regards to Rankins, though, I know it's not like one-on-ones doesn't really tell you a lot in terms of offensive lineman versus defensive lineman in training camp. But the last time Alex Kappa saw Sheldon Rankins, I think he was seeing ghosts, and like that matchup in itself was not one that I think Kappa wanted to remember. So those two going up against each other in some of these reps and some of these drills. How much does Kappa want to beat him again, or just beat him and get revenge? Like, how much does he remember that? How much has he learned from that? This is year 3 of Kappa at right guard for the Bengals. He's here for 2 more years, but he's at the peak of his physical ability, if you will. He's not going to get much better than what he is right now. And is it going to be a case of iron sharpening iron with him, or is Rankins going to give him the business once again? Because typically defensive linemen really dominate in those scenarios and in those drills, at this time of year. So how quickly do we notice that Sheldon Rankins is on the Bengals defensive line? Does he continue to get the better of Alex Kappa in that regard? Just how quickly all that kind of transpires is going to be really fascinating for me as well.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's go into concerns. We'll end with the mystery, the intrigue. That's where we'll end it. Top 3 concerns heading into Bengals training camp. We talked about this a little bit. I believe our last episode, which is kind of the what's going on in the running back spot, right? How's that going to work? What's going to happen there? How heavy are they going to lean on it? How much more effective is this committee approach going to be over when he's healthy? 1,200 to 1,400 yard from scrimmage, 10 touchdown machine that you get from Joe Mixon year in and year out. So I think that the mystery is, okay, how effective is Moss? How effective are Moss and Brown going to be as a duo? And then how is there going to be another addition towards final cuts? What's going to be the third back situation? Does Drew Sample play more fullback and hope that there's going to kind of get some more wiggle room opened up with him doing that? And how hopefully, if Burrow proves to be totally healthy and there's no training camp issue, please, no training camp issue with him this year, the less being less predictable on offense, how can that benefit the running game? All of those questions. So I've got concerns about the running game. I do have simultaneous excitement, but I do have some concerns about what that committee approach is, just because it's kind of a dive into an unknown from a guy that has been on the team for was he 7-8 years, Joe Mixon, on the team. So, and you knew what you were getting out of him year in, year out for the most part.
Yeah, I kind of go back and forth with this. I think you kind of described it pretty well in terms of just being an unknown, and that in itself causes a little caution. I think the fact that Chase Brown is expected to make such a leap in terms of usage is also it's a cause for it's you're cautiously excited about it, because you don't know how he's going to handle that. And I think the last thing that you want is to, I don't want to put this out into the ether, but you don't want him to end up being in that Chris Evans type of realm where like you're trying to give him chances and he's not taking the developmental steps that you're expecting. Now, of course, there's a lot of hype with Chase Brown because he's put in a lot of work with the same receivers coach that Yoshi was going to this offseason. The two of them worked together. They worked extremely hard, and Brown has really evolved his entire skill set in terms of being a receiver. So there's plenty of reason to believe why he's ready for that. But it's still, you're talking about a late round guy who I think had like 40 or so touches last year for the entire season, right? In a year where he was hopefully going to be ready for a little bit more than that. But of course, he was injured for part of the year. So it is a big leap, I think. And the fact that this is a brand new type of dynamic that they're really introducing, the last thing that you want is for Zach Moss to just really dominate the touches in the backfield, because while he's a quality player, you're not expecting him to be a bell cow. And that's the last thing that you want.
Yeah. So concerns comes with an asterisk a bit when I talk about the running backs, or we talk about the running backs, because there are elements. I'm excited to see Chase Brown in an elevated role. I'm excited to see what Zach Moss and he's a little bit more efficient in certain areas that were lacking in the position group a year ago and in other years as well. So, so there are elements of like excitement, but it's also a big dive into the unknown and relying on kind of a little bit of unknown commodities in a way, because they haven't shown a lot with this team. And then, you're talking about, okay, who's the third running back? So there's a lot of concern, but there is excitement in that group as well. You wanted to say something.
Oh, I mean, if we're going to continue with concerns and having no idea, who's the nose tackle right now? Honestly, is that a position that's still like accounted for on the Bengals depth chart? Is the position changed entirely? What is that rotation? We have no idea. There's far more questions than answers in regards to how they move on from DJ Reader. The fact that they didn't sign a veteran to just truly take over that role, because no veteran really existed in free agency. It just, as soon as he left for Detroit, everything was changing. And I don't like, Sheldon Rankins is going to play, and he's going to play some snaps, I think, as a shaded 2i. Maybe I think they're going to let him do that a little bit more than what he was used to doing in Houston. But right now, it's looking like two rookies are going to essentially take over that role, because I don't think they're going to really change what they do with BJ Hill entirely. I think they're going to keep him as a 3 technique. So this rotation now with Chris Jenkins and McKinley Jackson, is it truly what that's going to be? Like, is it going to be one guy playing more than the other in terms of just him being more reliable, whoever that may be? And how is that going to affect their development? Are they going to be put in positions where they're not set up to succeed based off of what they do best as interior defensive linemen? There's so many questions in regards to who's going to play next to Rankins and Hill. And if it's just going to be Rankins and Hill, playing the vast majority of snaps, and they're not going to go into these odd fronts where they had 3 defensive tackles on the field at once. They're going to have 2-3 techniques. Like I really don't. There's so much unknown, and it leads me to be a little pessimistic about the whole situation going into it.
Well, I mean, you talk about a high volume of snaps with Rankins. I mean, he's 30, so and I mean, I think he's going to be he's another guy who's been pretty consistent in his career and what he's done and the stats that he has put up. But again, we're talking 30. When does that decline potentially start? And if you're talking about a high volume of snaps there, what does that say about your rookies, right? So I think not only what are they going to do, how efficient is it going to be? How effective is it going to be? And so that is really a good point. And I think there's a lot of excitement with Chris Jenkins coming into the fold, and rightfully so. I think he's going to be a productive player at this level for probably a while. And I think there's some things you like about McKinley Jackson, but this is a physical division. And yes, there are capable quarterbacks and really good quarterbacks across the division in a lot of different ways, but there are very, very good rushing attacks in this division as well. And if you're not holding the point of attack well, if you are unable to have, kind of that big kind of guy that anchors everything in against the run, Um, that makes these games far more challenging. And that is a little bit of a puzzling thing to me, John, where the Bengals have done so much replenishment on defense. But when you look at and the focus has been we got to do better in the division, right? They had one divisional win last year. So that's where I get puzzled and I say, well, okay, you know what these teams do very well and like to do, which is they like to run the football quite a bit. They've got a lot of good players across the division at running back positions and able quarterbacks who can run around, all kinds of stuff. I do question a little bit of the logic there and what the path is going to be on defense and in that rotation.
And if it was even fixable in the first place in just one off season, or if this is going to take multiple years to really iron itself out after they really hit like a peak for a couple of years when they had the right personnel, and unfortunately they just couldn't keep that entire unit together. But no, it's true. It should be different this year when they're not consistently trailing, late in games when teams can just pound the rock over and over and just drain the clock and stuff like that. When you're forcing teams to be more pass heavy at the end of the game, that allows your pass rushers obviously to eat, and that potential liability doesn't need to be exposed so often. So it's definitely something that it's more than just the personnel up front. It's a myriad of issues that kind of result in just being a lackluster run defense. But it's definitely it needs to improve regardless.
Yeah, and then I guess for another concern really is the whole enigma that is going to be Joe Burrow. And what I mean by that is I'm optimistic that he is returning. I'm optimistic that he's recovered and, all that kind of stuff. But again, we're going to have a training camp where he is on a schedule, more or less. And there is an injury concern lingering. It's not a current injury. It's one he is coming back from, but there is, caution with that. And so there's that, there's the schedule, and then there's the ever annual question of how much preseason playing time is he going to get? How does that affect a potential slow start on the regular season? All of these aspects that go into the starting quarterback coming back from an injury, team cohesion. We talked about Burton being in there as a rookie, and again, you've got new running backs that are getting bigger roles. So all of these things for me, again, I'm optimistic that he's back. I'm optimistic that he's coming back and that he's going to have a great season, but there's still a lot of, I don't know if obstacles is the right word. There's a lot of things to navigate as he comes back this training camp. And we kind of have to see how that goes and hope that it doesn't lead to a slow start in the regular season.
I might end up copying and pasting that entire thing as my top mystery because that's where I was going to place it, I think, just because I think you could honestly put that entire discussion into any of these three categories.
That's right.
I think,
that's right.
No, I think you can be optimistic because I don't think Burrow abides by the definition of insanity. And he said all the right things about changing up his process and not trying to push through every little tiny problem with his body in the summer heat of July. He understands that there's a bigger picture here, and he can afford to miss a practice or two if it means that he doesn't have to deal with something that's going to bleed into the regular season. I think what he said is perfect. Like it's about getting from September to February. Like that's the schedule every single year that they have to plan around. And sometimes that just means taking it a little bit easy in July. So it's optimistic that he feels that way. It's pessimistic, or it's concerning because again, this has been an undeniable trend over the past 3 years, and part of it hasn't been his fault. He can't control when his appendix burst or whatnot. But last year was definitely something that he and the coaching staff needed to just do better at communicating with each other about what the situation was. And until we see that process unfold in a better way, that's going to be a concern. And the fact that we don't know, like both of these combining into this unknown, it makes it the biggest intrigue to me. Like, how many days off is he going to take? Is this wrist injury still at a point where it's, it's going to continue to I think bother him to some degree for the next coming weeks and months or whatnot, but not to the point where he can't get his work done, not to the point where it looks like he's anything less than 100%. But how much is it going to force him to be cautious and to maybe sit out a couple of practices. How many times do we see Jake Browning take snaps with the ones, even when Joe Burrow's fine and get back the next day? That's the biggest intrigue for me for sure.
Well, we'll call that the bridge topic. We'll bridge that into, because I have concerns about it. It's a mystery for you, so we're going to end on some mysteries here before we get to a fun remember him and a couple of other things for the show here. Okay, so that is a mystery to me as well. I mean, it's a concern, it's a mystery, all of that. For me, the mystery, I think there are a lot of capable players, but corner opposite Cam Taylor-Britt, yep, and what is going on there. Now, this could also be a concern, right? But you have a second-round pick that flashed towards the beginning of the year as a rookie last year. You have another first-round pick that's trying to find his right niche and right approach, and then you have another rookie this year that you've drafted later in the draft that you're pretty excited about. DJ Ivey showed some stuff last year, albeit he was largely special teams when the regular season came around. So there are options, and there are some good options there, but this has to get settled, and it's kind of like what you said about the interior defensive line. What's the plan here? What are they going to do? Who's going to rise up? What's going to be the best case for this team? And who's going to show, and when are they going to show it to make that push to be the opposite guy of Cam Taylor-Britt? And I think once that gets settled, that makes life a lot easier for the safeties, and it makes life a lot easier for Cam Taylor-Britt, so he doesn't have to be Superman all the time.
Right. And I think I'm not as concerned, at least in training camp, with how like Dax Hill is going to look, because again, like I know who he was at Michigan. This dude went up against receivers in man-to-man situations a plethora of times. That was in the slot, and it's the different type of release packages and whatnot. But I think I can be confident that he can drop back into zone, or at least bump and run with some of these guys in this setting. So it's not about like the mystery of how he's going to look. The biggest mystery to me is like, how is that competition going to be dealt out in terms of reps? Is it going to be just a 1-for-1? Let's see how Dax is on this one. Let's see how DJ is in this one. Is it going to be type of days? That's typically what it is when it is a true competition. Like a player will get one day, and then the next player will get the next practice and whatnot, and then they'll try to evaluate on a full day's workload in that sense. But I think with a position of this importance and just how important the trajectory of these guys' careers are going to be after this decision, after this training camp, it could just be a more intense version of that, where it could just be rotations in the middle of the day and giving them both first team reps as much as possible, because it is definitely a position that they need to figure out. Like you can't necessarily hide your starting cornerback on the outside like that. He has to be able to perform and step up. So if they have that guy by the end of August, great. But if not, I don't know.
Yeah, you got another mystery here. You started with Burrow. I went with the cornerback situation. What's another mystery for you heading into Bengals training camp?
Not to be repetitive, but a lot of what I just said, but at right tackle. Like, how often do they give Amarius Mims snaps with the ones? That was the case in OTAs when Trent Brown unexpectedly wasn't there. It wasn't a planned excuse for Trent Brown. That's just what happened, and he had to take care of something not football related, apparently, and that gave Mims exposure. It gave him a lot of time with Frank Pollock working next to Alex Kappa at right guard. And by the time minicamp came around, he was still getting reps, and they still wanted to see what he could do. They obviously wanted to give Trent Brown exposure for the first time, but I don't think they're going to be mad if Amarius Mims ends up being the better option at right tackle by the end of camp, if that's what they determine based off of the reps and preseason, all that stuff. Because he's the first round pick, because he's a lot younger, because he's more athletic. Obviously, Trent Brown is far more proven, and I think that's still the expectation that he looks like the better option by the time the regular season comes around. But is this truly going to be a open competition at right tackle? I don't think we would have expected it to be so maybe by the end of April, but now we're in July, and Mims has all these reps in his back pocket already on his resume entering his first training camp. Maybe it will be more of a closer competition, but we just have no idea. We could be completely wrong about this. I could be completely wrong about this, but I think the fact that we're talking about it just makes it a mystery.
It does make it a mystery, and it's kind of a shame. I guess the Bengals and their and what's occurred the last few years with their offensive line has kind of given a sense of a little bit of PTSD a little bit amongst fans and people who cover the team, because you would look at it and you say the Bengals made an improvement on their offensive line. They've got a lot of continuity now on the offensive line. This is the best offensive line that Joe Burrow is playing behind, but there's still, again, a little bit of what's going to go on here. Are they going to do a lot of the jumbo packages? Are they going to, because they showed that a bit in the spring. So what's the plan moving forward? Is it what's kind of the obvious path, which is Trent Brown now, bridge player to Marius Mims, or is it something else? I don't know. How effective is this group going to be? You mentioned we're going to probably be seeing the peak of Alex Kappa. Harris is sticking around, but he's getting up there in age a little bit. And then of course you've got Orlando Brown, who still had a good season last year, but probably not as good as some of the others with the Ravens and Chiefs, etc. So, and there's injury stuff and stuff that caused that, but still a good season from him last year. But you need to have a solid season from that group up front. There's going to be hits, there's going to be sacks because of the way Joe Burrow plays. Maybe he limits that a little bit from yet another hard lesson he learned last year, but we're excited about it. We're excited about what's at right tackle, but you go, okay, we think this is going to be a lot better, but how much better is this going to be? How much better is this group going to be this year? Because we project them to be better.
Yeah, and I think just talking through all that also kind of made me realize that, Trent Brown is still, he's 31 years old, and he's dealt with durability concerns in the past. I think out of all the players on the team, on the roster right now, he's probably the guy that probably gets, I don't know if you want to call it mandatory rest days, but he just gets like off days in training camp just to make sure that
right.
he's going to be right for the regular season. And that could just be the way to give Amarius Mims those reps with the ones during training camp. And like I think he's going to play the most amount of snaps that we've seen from a Bengals first round pick in recent years in the preseason. Like, I think they're going to give him, he might play every single snap in the preseason just for the sake of him actually getting reps. And that's going to factor into everything as well. But yeah, like, it's just making sure that you have some type of easy decision to make by the time September comes around, where you're confident in who that guy is going to be, and hopefully the health maintains at the other four positions as it did for pretty much all of last year. There's still depth concerns along the interior, even with the addition of Matt Lee. You don't know how ready he's going to be out the gate. So making sure that that entire group comes out unscathed by the time September rolls around. We can't say it enough how important it is for Joe Burrow to have a decent offensive line.
Yep. And he will, but there's stuff of mystery that's around that offensive line. So had a little fun talking some top threes about training camp, and obviously we'll be talking more training camp next week. One of the things we're excited, we can't divulge names quite yet until it's definitive, but we're looking at bringing on a player. We're looking at bringing on a prominent sports writer, and then another author here in the next few weeks on the show through various interview opportunities. So we'll announce those once they're locked in, but we are in conversations of getting that stuff. And I think you guys will enjoy what we've got coming up in the next few episodes. If for some reason you didn't like this, but I had fun. I had fun talking camp with you, John. I always have fun with you, John. Yeah, I always have fun with you. All right. So that's a quasi announcement. Just because stuff isn't locked in yet, can't really divulge too much in terms of detail quite yet, but trust me, hang with us. We'll announce it as we get some stuff dialed in for you. So I've got a fun. You did last show. You did one of my favorite guys. Do you remember who you did and remember him last time?
Tab Perry.
Yeah, tabulous Perry. Fabulous. I love that guy. That was a fun player. I've got one that is more of the womp variety. And when I'm gonna pull up a picture here in just a second, but I want to see if you remember. You may not even know who this guy is offhand, but I'm going to pull up a picture and I'm going to see if you know who this is, because he is a little bit of, that great Twitter account, Obscure Bengals. He's kind of belonging into that arena. Let me pull this up for you here. All right. It's older. It's an older player. Does that player ring a bell to you at all?
I don't think so. Don't think so.
Okay. And I don't blame you here. This player was he is Reggie Rembert, and Reggie Rembert was a guy. Here's kind of his path. It was a weird path to the Bengals. He was a good receiver out of West Virginia. So he played. There's 2 true seasons he played. He was a redshirt guy. His senior year, 47 catches, 850 yards, 11 touchdowns. Now, when you're talking about 1989, not an overly pass-happy era, particularly in college football. There's a lot of it was all about running backs, and sometimes they were doing option stuff in college a lot, all that kind of stuff. But 850 yards, 11 touchdowns, that's not really much to scoff about. Year prior, he had 22.7 yards per reception and 7 touchdowns. So in 2 seasons, 18 touchdown catches. Pretty good stuff from Reggie Rembert. He was picked by the Jets in the 2nd round in the 1990 draft. And then because this was before all of the rookie wage scale and all this kind of stuff, they did not come to an agreement on the contract. And so his rights were traded to the Bengals the following season there. So the Bengals ended up signing him. And so this guy was, kind of touted to be a kind of a next big thing. I mean, the Bengals were transitioning out of, Eddie Brown, and he's kind of getting towards the end of his career. And then Tim McGee, who left a little while later and then came back. So all these guys from the 80s, that star power, Collinsworth, all these guys, they were kind of leaving or heading towards the end of their career. So this was a guy that they leaned on pretty heavily. And this guy, John, as I told you, 2 seasons, 18 touchdown catches, etc. in I think it was 3 full seasons with the Bengals. Would you like to know what he amassed with the Bengals in terms of stats?
I can't imagine it's going to be a lot based off these context clues.
Yeah. So 36 catches in 3 seasons, 437 yards, and 1 receiving touchdown as a Cincinnati Bengal. So a guy that had a lot of promise, a guy that I think a lot of people had high hopes for based on him being a pretty high pick. His career got off to a rocky start because of the contract stuff. And unfortunately, we saw this a lot with a lot of Bengals players, 1st-round picks that were kind of quote unquote bust in that 90s era because of some contract disputes and all that kind of stuff. So unfortunately, this guy kind of fell into that as well because of, some of that stuff going on. But a remember him, Reggie Rembert. He wore number 80 and 88 for the Bengals, I think. Not much to remember, though, unfortunately. And I don't mean that as an insult to him. Just career did not go the way that he had wanted.
It's funny hearing about players traded to the Bengals because of contract disputes. You'd think back in those days it would be the other way around.
Yeah.
So that was a nice change of pace.
Yeah. I mean, but if you know, John, I mean, Mike Brown likes him some talented wide receivers, right? I mean, he will collect them. And this team has had many, many, many great wide receivers for sure, but he will collect them and he will go at extra lengths that maybe he would not go for other, at least back then, not go for other types of players or positions. But a guy that lives in, I don't know if infamy, but a little bit of a draft bust, unfortunately, for the Bengals they had high hopes for him.
Well, it's not like they drafted him, like he was someone who was drafted, in the top 30 picks by, major organization, and like, yeah, we'll take him if you guys can't figure out an agreement with him. And unfortunately, it just didn't work out for whatever reason. But no, this segment, I it's very popular. I hope all of our fans love it. It's less remember him for me, more about hey learn about this guy for the very first time. I'm going to Bengals history class, and I'm coming out with a lot of these players that I would never learn otherwise if I wasn't on the show.
Yeah, now you're. It's for John. It's now you're going to remember him, right? Well, I kind of already did a little bit of a mic drop with a quasi announcement, and I hate to be vague, but like I said, we're locking some stuff in, and we'll get that out to you once we get everything finalized there. But what do you got for us on our way out, John?
Nothing much. It is the middle of July, though. Training camp is almost here. And like Anthony mentioned at the top of the show, I don't know if there's a better thing for Bengals fans to do to really kick off training camp than by going to Bengal Gym's event. It's called Jungle Jam, correct?
Yes.
Jungle Jam, yeah, Northern Kentucky. You'll have Zach Taylor there. You'll have players there. You'll have Kevin and Jason there. Like, everyone's going to be there. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be there, but that's all right. Everyone else important is going to be there, and I can't think of a better way to really kick off this, what hopefully is a great season, with another great event held by our very own Bengal Gym. So definitely check that out next next Saturday.
Yeah, it should be. I mean, it's amazing what Jim is, and not just Jim. And I know he would admit that, Tom and Mark and Tony and Jamie and all of them are great guys, and they do a lot of stuff that's fun for the fans, great for charity and community stuff, and they, because of everything they've done, they've built a lot of great connections with the team. And so I just think it's a cool thing that they are doing this for a lot of people, right? I mean, they're doing this for fans and all of that. And we're pleased to be, getting some cool behind the scenes access a little bit. So we'll see exactly what will come of that. But we're appreciative of the opportunity, and should be a lot of fun for everybody in attendance there. And how hot is it out there right now, John? Give me some. If I'm coming out there, am I needing just tank top and shorts the whole time? I mean, what am I dealing with?
I mean, I'm about to hit you with the ultimate Midwestern, man. It's not the heat, man. It's the humidity at the moment. Yeah, a lot of rain in the past week or so. I think the humidity percentage right now, according to my phone, is it's only 56%. So it only feels like 92 degrees out here, and I would imagine that's going to be the case for next weekend. Hopefully, we stay dry here because we've had plenty of rain. The Ohio River is probably a little bit higher than it's used to be at this time of year.
Well, that's going to do it for us, and we're having some fun. We've got some good stuff on the horizon for you. We appreciate all the people who have tuned in through a variety of different platforms live. We've got a lot of people doing that. Appreciate you doing that, and we'll keep hammering you with Bengals content. Training camp is right around the corner, and we'll keep marching to it. We're having some fun. So subscribe to the Believe in Cincy channel. I linked it in the live chat. We'll link it in the show bio as well. Go back and get all the shows there, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel underneath John by that Cincy Jungle icon. Click the show icon and subscribe button from there. We appreciate all the support. We appreciate all the comments, live listeners, people who watch and or listen after the fact. Thank you, John. Have a great weekend ahead, bud.
You as well, man.
Thanks.